Hello, everyone. Hi to both our audiences here. We'll be getting started soon. So this is a little tricky that we're going to do a hybrid meeting here today. So we've got about 27 people online who will be listening in, and we have probably more than a dozen here in person. So thank you all for coming. My name is Barbara Richter. I'm the Executive Director at the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions. And I got a call from Harry Woolander at the Harrisville Conservation Commission. And he had this great idea of bringing Dr. McDonald up here to talk about the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid and biocontrols for that. So I want to go ahead and let the Harrisville Conservation Commission run with this, but I wanted to be able to share this with a lot of other people who I knew would be interested in this information. So again, thank you for joining us, and Harry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it. Well, yeah, welcome to all you folks online. Barbara put out an email to her whole mailing list inviting you all, and here we are, and I'm delighted to see you folks here in person as well. The Harrisville Conservation Commission, I'll correct one little thing. I did not have an idea to bring Dick McDonald up. I'll blame Ralph Zingaro, plant doctor, who's a member of our Conservation Commission and a research horticulturalist with training from Cornell, who has opened our eyes to many things in this past couple of years. We are also fortunate as Conservation Commission to have Don Scott, who is a landscape architect whose first 10 years or so were spent in environmental mitigation projects. If it has water flows, if it has ways to safety-proof things, he's up to the thick of it in Harrisville. We also have John Sandry, who has a landscaping business as well as an arboriculture business and some background in soil science with the Peace Corps. And I'm a lowly biologist with a pre-med background and some graduate study at Antioch in environmental management before I went and got an MBA so I could coordinate some of this stuff. It's an amazing set of skills that we have in one place, and I'm just thrilled to have it here. Let me see. Where shall I begin? I'm going to share a few things first about Harrisville. Harrisville is a small town. We're 7 miles wide, 3 miles high. We are located between Dublin and Nelson. We are actually divided off from both Dublin and Nelson 150 years ago. That's better. So we're about 7 miles wide, 3 miles high. A few years ago, I have a small house, a house here on Harrisville Pond, and looked over in my backyard and saw a dead tree. I thought it was from some recent construction work that may have disturbed the roots. But 2 years later, there were 2 more dead hemlock trees right next to my driveway. Ralph identified the problem as the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, and since then, we, the commission, dove into learning more about this. Ralph also reached out and found Dr. Richard McDonald from North Carolina, who has an amazing story to tell about his work with a beetle that eats Hemlock Woolly Adelgids. We've been working all year on this project, and this week, Dr. McDonald's here with us. We've been out beating the woods looking for Adelgid sites because there is a Laricobius nigrinus beetle that eats the little suckers, and we're going to be importing them. He's going to ship them up from North Carolina. I'm going to let him tell the story of why and how they're here. But I did want to share with you just a few things, because to us, as you drive by Lake Scatutucky along the shore, you see trees looking like this. And when you look at trees in the spring and you look at their needles, you see a branch that can look like this. It's a heavy infestation of Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. Now you know why they call it woolly. And when you start looking for these, you see them all over the place. So we've been out in the woods the last 3 days because these adelgids are just now emerging from the ground and starting to show up on the trees. We want to find sites in town that have pretty heavily infestation so that when Dr. McDonald sends up the nigrinus bugs, we release them onto nice, happy feasting grounds so that they'll grow and mature and reproduce. With time and luck, we will establish local breeding populations that can grow and spread out and work and has worked in North Carolina. The USDA issued the state a permit to release these bugs here, and we have a letter allowing us to work under their permit for this project. The nigrinus bug solely predates on the woolly adelgids. As we've identified a dozen sites in town that are densely forested with hemlocks. We're looking at the sites now to see that they have woolly adelgids that are emerging from the ground this time of year. We're going to select a dozen sites for releases of 300 beetles in a site, and we hope in 3, 4, 6, 7 years to create breeding populations throughout town and beyond, because the adelgids spread at 1 mile or 2 miles a year. By having a dozen sites, we're hoping they reinforce each other as the populations grow together and merge and gather a dense enough population of Laricobius nigrinus beetles to suppress the adelgid population to below a 30% infestation rate, at which the hemlocks stop dying and start growing again. Having said that, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Richard McDonald, who is up here from North Carolina, where he runs a business called Symbiont Biological Control, where he looks for insects to create a balance in nature with other insect pests. And so with that, I'll stop the share and come on up here, Dr. McDonald.
Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to be here from devastated Boone, North Carolina, where we've just had the worst natural disaster in hundreds of years. And so one of the reasons I am also here, and I'm talking to everybody here, including my buddy Ryan Crandall, is we are going to need massive ecological restoration. So if you guys know people that are in the nursery industry that are raising native plants, we have thousands of square miles of riparian habitat that have been utterly destroyed. It has been there is a USGS water gauge at the Watauga River about a half a mile from my house. And Ralph's been there, by the way. The river gauge normally is about 2.5 feet. Well, it went to 27 feet and then the gauge washed away. We're having 30,000 cubic gallons per second water running by. It destroyed all the houses in the valley. Luckily, I live on a ridge about a quarter mile up a ridge. I have gravity-fed water, on-demand water heater, propane, and I can poop in a sawdust toilet when I need to. So that was what we did. We didn't have electricity. I also have solar panels and forklift batteries, so I had light, and I had a refrigerator and a freezer. So these are things to think about when everything goes down and you have to go into whatever my buddy down the road called it Madagascar mode, because he works in Madagascar a lot, and that's not taking anything away from them, but to say that you don't have electricity, you don't have phone, you don't have cell, you don't have internet, you don't have any of those things. Okay, so the name of this, is there a way I can get this bar off the screen there? Will it go away? Okay. Let's see if I can get somewhere. I'll let you do that.
Give it a shot. I believe we can do
Just
something
click
like
that. Yeah, that's good enough.
Okay.
We all know what beetles save needles means. Okay. So the title of my talk is Beetles Save Needles. This is a 25-year story that I'm about to tell you guys. And when I originally put this together for you guys, I took all the time element out because I just wanted you guys to know what the facts were. But it doesn't work unless you tell a story and put the perspective in it, because you guys are where we were 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Actually, 2002 is when we got the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, and we got our first release of Laricobius nigrinus in 2003. I started in this program in 1999 with Fred Hain and Felton Hastings with the North Carolina State University release and Sasagi skimnasugi, which didn't work. And the other thing I want to do up front, I want to thank all the people that are here today and all the people that have helped me to work on this, because this has always been a group community project, and relationships are essential to this, to be able to accomplish something on the scale that we did. Okay, let's see if we can get this to move. What do we got to do? Hit it again, or do I have to do down?
Let's see.
How do you get that to move?
I think we have to go to the original presentation.
Okay.
And move it there.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, then go to show. Where is that? There it is. Okay. Bam. There we go. So I want to thank Harry and Peg. They have been more than kind, and they've been patient, and we've had permitting problems and all that. And I also want to thank Ralph. Ralph came down to North Carolina, saw all of our glorious hemlocks, met Shin Goswami, and Shin asked him, she looked at him and said, "Didn't I dance with you at Hubbard Brook Barn?" And he said, "Yes." And then I went, "Game over. Game is over." However, the field lab that we visited is gone. It's wiped out. It was right by the Elk River. One of the things that I'm going to have to do when we get back is it's going to take me at least 2 weeks to be able to go out to my original sites that I could go to in several days now and figure out how to get to these sites, because just in the county of Watauga alone, there are more than 200 roads washed out. Okay. All right. This is Lee Humble, the late, great Lee Humble, Canadian. Anybody in here Canadian? Okay, well, he gave us British Columbia biotype of Laricobius nigrinus twice. And the very first thing that he ever said to me when I met him was, "You can use this beetle like a biopesticide." And I've got a PhD in biocontrol, and I didn't believe him. We okay?
One little adjustment.
Okay, yeah.
We can get that. And, I'm not sure how to get it to focus on you, though. There you are.
Okay.
Apparently you were out of the frame.
Oh, okay. I thought I was in the frame. So Lee Humble came to me. This would have been in 2003 at the invasive species meeting in Annapolis, Maryland. And I was fortunate enough to meet him, and he had given this beetle to the Forest Service 2 different times. The first time it was determined that it was too difficult to rear, and he gave it then to Scott Salem and Lockcock at Virginia, whose names here are obscured, but I've got them here in a second. And those guys were able to raise this in the lab, and then suddenly we realized that this was an incredible predator. This is on the same scale as the Vidalia beetle project with citrus in California. I will tell you that right now, okay? Now, I just want to go through this. I'm just going to recite this very quickly for the recording here so that everybody knows. I started in Christmas trees in 1997, and I worked in Christmas trees for 5 years. And in the meantime, I began moving over into Hemlock Woolly Adelgid because I was working with Balsam Woolly Adelgid on Fraser firs. And what we found with that is if we farmscape the Fraser fir orchards, we didn't need to spray for Balsam Woolly Adelgid. And we had organic Christmas tree growers that were on their 4th and 5th rotation of trees. And that's every 7 years. So that's 28 to 35 years of absolutely no pesticides, no Roundup, no merit, none of those things, okay? In 2002, we organized a conference at the Broyhill Conference Center at Appalachian State University, and my major professor, Professor Hancock, and Professor Scott Salem came down and told us about this beetle. And at the time, this was all so new, and we had a room full of about 70 people. And Hugh Morton, the wealthiest man in North Carolina at that time, that owned Grandfather Mountain, by the way, it was owned by the McCrae family and Hugh Morton, stood up. Well, lightning bolts started flying around the room. So Hugh stands up and he looks at Professor Koch and he goes, "Can you guarantee me these beetles work?" And Locke, without a beat, just went, "Yes, but we don't have enough of them." Okay, so that set the stage. Okay, everybody left that meeting. It was all in disarray. And so finally, I got a call from Stan Sturry of Blue Ridge Resource Conservation and Development Program, and he said, "Hey, aren't you interested in working on Hemlock Woolly Adelgid?" And I said, "I have been working on Hemlock Woolly Adelgid for 4 years, Stan." And he said, "Well, we've got funding through the North Carolina Urban Community Forestry Program, and you can get a grant for $15,000. The director of the program, Nancy Stairs, God bless her, she is the she's the forester of Rhode Island right now. She's the head forester of the state of Rhode Island, if I get that correctly, gave us the money. We were able to make the first release of Laricobius nigrinus at Hemlock Hill that I got from Virginia Tech. We got 300 beetles. So at the Broyhill meeting in 2002, I also met the golf course superintendent for Grandfather Golf and Country Club, one of the preeminent country clubs up there. His name, and Peter Gurdon, and I went to Peter and said, "As soon as I know enough to tell you what we're going to do, I will call you." And I waited 5 years until I knew what was going on, and I called him in 2007. I said, "Pete, I was at the Broyhill Center. Do you remember I told you I would call you back when we knew what was going on with Laricobius nigrinus?" And he goes, "You're that long-haired boy, aren't you?" And thus began a great relationship, right? So the very first thing Pete told me was, I need to go in front of the Grandfather Golf and Country Club board. Okay, oh yeah, you see that. And make a presentation. So long story short, and they agreed to do it. And the reason is because Grandfather Golf and Country Club is just like here. Half of the trees are hemlocks. And so what I said is, it's going to cost you guys about $3,000 for every 70-foot tree to take down, and they were in like Flynn. Okay. So in 2010, I got a grant from APHIS to redistribute beetles. I got a 4-year grant, and they extended it another year because they liked the program. We were able to redistribute beetles to all areas of the high country because I wanted to make our 7-county high country area a giant insectary, and we were able to do it. It was great. And that's due to Ron Weeks of APHIS. I want to thank Ron. And then in 2014, Blue Ridge RC&D got back up with me again, and Nancy Stairs had additional funding, and we started in again on another of this program to do a little bit more to spread it out now that we had it over the 7-county area. And in 2015, I was doing a talk in Spruce Pine, and Tim Sweeney's right-hand man came to me, Pat Dale, wonderful guy, Pat Dale, David McKinney, and Ethan Freeman. And Tim Sweeney is the wealthiest man in North Carolina. He's the guy that that started Epic Games and Fortnite. He's just a brilliant genius of a computing guy. And those guys hired me for 5 years initially, and I had to sign an NDA. So I had to drop off the map for a while. He had 50,000+ acres that were covered in hemlock. They're all great. I'm asking those guys now to let us release that data, and they'll do it. They're gonna do it sometime this month, but they had to go back and look through everything and make sure that if there's some area that they don't want people to know about, we're gonna block that out, okay? All right. Now, how do I make this thing go down?
You're just trying to get rid of the control bar.
No, I'm trying to go down to the next slide.
Yeah.
What do you got to do?
Good question.
Here, page down.
No, I think we need to be sure on the PowerPoint presentation, not the Zoom of it.
There we go. So I just hit that?
Yeah, I think
Or will
it
it go?
happened when we
Oh,
got back
okay.
on screen.
All right, so very quickly here, what makes a healthy hemlock and what makes a sick hemlock? All right, this becomes one of the very important things. And the Canadians taught me a lot of this. Ashley Lamb and Gabriella Zila-Below. And these were students of Scott Salem and Professor Koch that Lee Humble gave to us. So I really thank the Canadians. You could call them Canadian hemlocks or Eastern hemlocks, but they naturally occur in these moist mesic coves that you guys hear. It's just perfect. They need needle duff. You know, a natural hemlock is going to have needle duff all the way around the drip line. It's always going to have that. We need good fungus-based soils. So if you're trying to rescue trees, you can use a fungus-based compost tree to help these trees. You want to avoid dry, windy, rocky areas. You want winter sun. Our Carolina hemlocks like rocky areas. They have a taproot like a carrot, and you guys would love this tree. If you don't have any around here, it's great. Easterns have the root system kind of like a hand where they have brace roots come down. And if those brace roots get damaged, the tree gets stressed. And if those trees have adelgid, they just go into adelgid outbreak almost permanently because they're so stressed. What makes a sick hemlock? When we look around here and you guys see a hemlock sitting on a rock, that is an off-site tree. We could go out and we could see a gradation in the forest where you would have trees that are in really good sites, and then all of a sudden you hit this rocky southwest slope, and these trees look rattier, and they're not, you know, the whole crown's not full anymore. So if you're on a southwest slope next to a bluff building or a parking lot, I go out and I'm like, we can do one of two things here. We can either cut that tree down, or you're going to have to treat it until the end of time. Or if they get enough beetles in, then that becomes a great beetle collecting tree, which is what I found in Seattle. Okay. The other thing that happens with a lot of my small saplings where we are is these buck deer just love them and they tear them up like crazy, which makes me a little angry. And then you have hedges that are not taken care of. Though, you know, trees are not supposed to be made into hedges. Okay. Now, so here's what we began to do. We needed to know what the thresholds were. All of a sudden, what we wanted to do is look at this mechanistically and with integrated pest management, and we needed to know what the thresholds were for action, okay? One of the most important things that happened was this paper that came out in 2003 by Burkle and Logan, which showed that hemlocks photosynthesize year-round. And that was like a big thing at first. Anytime here it's above about 25 degrees, your hemlocks are going to photosynthesize. And in fact, what's happening right now, when all these leaves drop, that's when the tree turns on and the adelgids pop. Because the adelgids are out to block the photosynthate from going into the tree and put it into them. Okay? So what we found out was once a hemlock has less than a third of its needles infested, it actually grows better than normal because there's some kind of balance there And the tree is stimulated and says, "Ooh, I've got something going on here. I need to really grow." And the beetle really helps with that. The other thing that I wonder about, and I'm probably not going to live for another couple hundred years to figure this out, but I believe once you put these beetles in there, I always wondered why Western hemlocks are a third bigger, because the Adelgids make these trees sturdier because they don't grow quite as fast. You know what I mean? They're limiting. They're only in the yearling growth. That's the only place that they can survive. So they're slowly making these trees tougher and sturdier, I believe, but I'm not sure about that totally. But I wonder why Western hemlocks are that much bigger. Okay. The reason that the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid did so well in North America is partly due to errors in identification. So one of the things in IPM and in entomology, the number one thing is correct identification of the pest. And that means life history, origin, all of that. When I started in this program, here's what we knew. The Hemlock Woolly Adelgid was native to Asia. Mark McClure, who was the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid expert at that time, went to Seattle. And I believe he went there maybe in late April and he left in like September. So he totally missed nigrinus because nigrinus comes out in now and is out until April and May. So he went to 42 sites and he published this in American Nurseryman in 1992. And this threw us off 10 years because we thought no effect predators were effect predators. Okay. And we thought that the hemlock forest was totally doomed. So from 1999 to 2006, every meeting that we go to was kumbaya. And everybody that stood up would say, all these trees have died. All of my trees have died. These trees over here have died. And it would make you sick to your stomach. But we wanted to stay with it. We knew something we hoped for a breakthrough. Now, I'm from Missouri. Everybody knows this guy is Mark Twain. This is one of my favorite quotes of Mark Twain. It always has been. It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know sure that just ain't so. And I'm from Missouri, so you need to show me this stuff. And so that's what we did. We went to Seattle. By 2006, Nathan Havel of the Forest Service, and by the way, the Forest Service is critical in all this. They were the hub. Nathan Havel, Rusty Ray, Brad Onken, Dick Reardon, these guys, they were all working on this. But here's the question that I wanted to ask you guys. What % of the forest in New Hampshire is private? 80%. The Forest Service did not have the ability to save your trees. They are mandated to save their own national forest, okay? So we had to make a side program that would interface with them. In other words, there's a gap between what the Forest Service would do and what our private needs were, and we needed to bridge that gap. And so by 2006, we knew the Adelgid was native to the Pacific Northwest. I happened to sit in on the very seminar where Nathan announced this, and I almost pooped my pants. Because what that meant was we did have effective natural enemies in Seattle. In Seattle, by the way, the same place that said that there were none. And when we went out there, one of the things, one of my tricks is ask the right questions, right? You got to ask the right questions. So when we got out to Seattle, I asked David Zuckerman, Washington Park Arboretum manager at the University of Washington, I said, do you guys have eastern hemlocks? He goes, we have hundreds of eastern hemlocks. We have a place in Washington Park Arboretum called Hemlock Hill that has every hemlock in the world. And then what he knew and began directing me to, he said, Seattle Golf Course has dozens and dozens of eastern hemlocks. I know where Carolina hemlocks are. He gave us this map and we started driving around and finding eastern hemlocks all over Seattle. We went to Calvary Cemetery, which is a 10 square block cemetery right above the University of Washington, for any of you that are familiar with Seattle. They have 9 eastern hemlocks that were planted in 1900, and some of them are 10 feet in circumference. And so I went to their manager and I said, do you treat for Adelgids? And he said, what are they? And I said, and then he got to thinking, and he goes, oh, that's that white stuff. I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, that stuff just comes and goes. Because what would happen there, these populations would build up and the beetle would just wipe it out. And it became patch dynamics. Every year, it was like whack-a-mole. Wherever they were that year, boom, it was gone, but they were somewhere else. You know what I mean? It was patch dynamics that was going on. So suddenly we had the clues to know what was going on here. Here is a distribution of the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid in 2006. Notice New Hampshire is there. What happened back then is you guys had cold winters, and this strain of Adelgid that we got came from southern Japan. And it was cold susceptible for about the first 10 years. And it's gotten over that cold hump where we are. And it's gotten over it in Maryland. Maryland gets colder than we do, and they have more Adelgids. Delaware water gap, same thing, okay? So what I think has happened here, and here's where we are with you guys, is your climate is warming. You are becoming us. And we are becoming Raleigh. We have mockingbirds in Boone. You know what I mean? And that they are warm climate birds. And we have them now in the mountains because everything is getting warmer. Winter is shorter. We don't get the cold snaps that we used to get. We don't get the vortexes. So I just wanted to show you that, to show you that you guys have had Adelgids. In fact, Ryan told me that you guys have had Adelgids since about 2004, down around Portsmouth. You know what I mean? In that area, because it came up the coast. Okay. So you guys have had Adelgids for a long time, and your cold has kept them at bay. Ain't going to do it no more. And the cavalry has shown up. All right. And that's you guys and me. All right. Now, here's the really neat thing. This beetle was imported from Victoria, BC to the United States in 1997 for studies, and I knew that because I was a Virginia Tech alum, and man, I'm hanging out down at the insectary that I used to live at, all right? This predator is winter active. Hemlocks photosynthesize in the winter. It's cold tolerant. I can collect these beetles up at Paradise in Mount Rainier. See if I can find this thing and admit. All right. This beetle is host specific to Adelgids. The only Adelgids that it reproduces on are pine bark Adelgid and Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. So that's really great because when you have a vortex and it kills all the Hemlock Woolly Adelgids out, the pine bark Adelgids are way cold tolerant. So the beetles just move over to the pines. They prefer hemlock. Okay. This beetle is totally synchronized with Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. It has a high fecundity of 100 to 200 eggs per beetle, and even higher than that with bigger females. It has a long oviposition period that goes from late January all the way through April. So you get this big Gaussian curve. The other thing that happens is you're going to have beetles emerge all the way through the new year. They don't all come out right now. They just, it's a Gaussian, it's a bell curve, okay? They eat all life stages of the Adelgid, and they selectively when I say selective oviposition, what I mean is you have an ovisac, and this beetle has an ovipositor like a wasp or like a Vidalia beetle, where it actually extends the ovipositor. This is unusual for a beetle. It extends the ovipositor and places an egg inside of the ovisac, and then it marks it. Any other female come by goes, oh, there's already one in there. So they don't waste eggs. It's amazing how they do this. They live, look how long they live. They live at least from October to May, and I've found females up on the side of Grandfather Mountain that were really big that were in June, and they probably live for more than 1 year. I'd say these larger females can live probably for at least a year, at least maybe 2 years or 14 months or longer. Okay. Here's a little bit of numbers. I'll go through them kind of quickly. But when David Moselle and I go out to Seattle, we dissected 1,200 ovisacs, and we did it in a really interesting way. We did 10 ovisacs on each of north, east, south, and west. So that's 40 per tree. But we did all these trees up to 1,200 ovisacs. Half of the ovisacs had a beetle egg or a larvae in them. And they have to go out there, they have to go to at least one other ovisac because they eat about 235 Adelgid eggs. And the ovisacs out west have about 150 to 170 eggs. They're big. So the beetles can hatch out of that and go to one other ovisac and complete development. Where I am, the Adelgids only have 32 eggs per ovisac. So these larvae got to go to almost 10 ovisacs because they're not fastidious eaters. They're kind of like that ghost in Ghostbusters where they're going, and they're going through and it throws things aside. Once an ovisac is ruptured, wind, mites, rain, any of the shaking of the trees knocks all those other eggs. I mean, when an ovisac is ruptured, it's doomed. It desiccates all that stuff. So look at the two numbers there. 600 out of 1,200 ovisacs have an egg or a larvae, and 564 of the remaining 600 ovisacs were eaten by predators. Our very first time out, we got 97% predation rate. So I looked at Dave and I said, man, I think these beetles are going to cause the population in Washington Park Arboretum to collapse. Okay. So here's the egg. It's a big yellow egg, and under ultraviolet light, by the way, that glows bright green. We're going to get to that in a minute. And those are Adelgid eggs. You can see they're kind of a burgundy color. And so that's what we were doing. We were opening up these ovisacs and looking for eggs and larvae. Here's a larva. And we were using ethanol to dissolve the wool away from these ovisacs, dripping it on there. I don't do that anymore. I just tease them open. That little larva eats a 220 to 250, so I average it out to 235 eggs or crawlers. They will catch crawlers, bite their head, blow them up and down like a balloon a few times, and then suck them dry and then pop them out of the way. I love to watch that stuff. I'm sorry. Oh, and by the way, my wife, Kate Cahow, is up here too, and she's been an angel and has helped me with so much of this. So I meant to say that up front, but you weren't here, so I didn't know what to do there. So, and same with Peg. All right, here we are, 2005. I'm counting one branch, and this is consistent, but I just want to show you what a branch would look like. It had 486 ovisacs on it. We had 97% predation. The very next year, on a meter-long branch, we had 4 ovisacs. What that did is it reset the Adelgid, where it's going to take that Adelgid 5 to 8 years to build back up to a population. And this is in the urban community interface. In the forest, when it goes back into balance, it just doesn't go out. It's like a top. Boom, it's up. So one of the secrets that you guys have here is you have urban community interface. It's not just, it's hard to collect beetles in the forest. You want to go to the urban community interface, and by that I mean cemeteries, schools, any kind of land that has openings, parks. There was a really good place in Seattle called Fircrest that was a mental institution that the first time I was there, they thought that I was an escaped patient and they were chasing me around with these 2 guards on walkie-talkies. Patient is in quadrant number 4 right now. And they had an older guy there that was one of their patients that they would let out. And he saw me one day. His name's Wayne. And that day he was wearing he either wore a 3-piece impeccable wool suit, looked like a doctor, held a clipboard, had glasses. He's watching me and he's doing this. And I'm like, who's that doctor over there? And they go, no, he's a patient. And he looks at me and he goes, you're the only person in Seattle that holds an umbrella upside down. And that's the way he said it. And the next time I saw him, he was wearing a Santa Claus suit. Those are his only 2 suits that he wore. So I don't know what the mood was there. Whoop, I went back one. It doesn't matter. So you could either stand in line to try to get beetles, and we were the lowest of the low on the totem pole because we weren't with any federal agency, and these guys were running this thing. So suddenly, with David Mozell, I began to just go out to Seattle and collect beetles, and I had gotten up with Pete Gurdon. And Pete said, I want to go out in February. You saw that where I had that back. We Shark Tanked the board of directors, they gave us money, and Pete's like, I'm going out with you. So we go out. Let's see here. Okay. So this would be part of the handout that you get, the full handout. This is the stuff that we use normally to collect. If I'm shipping to a laboratory or a quarantine, I'm going to put food, I call that food. I'm going to put clippings in there that have a lot of adelgids for the beetles, okay? If I'm shipping to you guys, I'm going to put them on Excelsior or Spanish moss, and I'll put a couple pieces of filter paper with sugar water in there so that they won't desiccate. But I'm going to ship them overnight, and one of the best ways to ship them overnight is you go into either a UPS or a FedEx, and you say, this box has my wife's gloves in it, and she's going to kill me if they don't get it. And the guy's like, oh, I got a couple special. I'm married too, buddy. I know that one. Let's put down, we've got a couple other check marks here. We can deliver on the weekend for you, and I'm going to put in the front of the truck. Right? They actually do that. You know what I mean? Is when everything's sitting there, they're like, that thing goes first. Okay. And the other thing that we will do is I will provide you with a tracking number where we know where this thing is every hour of the day till it gets to you. And if I can get it to the shipping place by 4 p.m., it's going to be here. If you want to spend big bucks, I can have it here by 10. You know what I mean? They'll say guaranteed morning, guaranteed afternoon. So usually what I do is I want it there by 10, because if they don't get it there by 10, they're going to get it there really quickly. And you have to lie. You cannot say that you are shipping bugs. I had David Mauzell and Tom McAvoy go to the same FedEx that I went into, and I'm looking back and I'm like, nah, I know what these guys are going to do. They're going to fess up. And they come out and they're wide-eyed, and they've got this big pink sheet that they've got to drive down to the Seattle FedEx and talk to those guys. And I said, give me that sheet. Let me repack it and I'll go in and send it off. So I went in and sent it off, but you cannot be, you know what I mean? We do what we could do to make this work. So you have all this stuff here. It's all pretty common sense. You got an aspirator, and this is back before iPhone picture. I like to use gloves because you're going to be pounding about 3,000 pounds a day if you're collecting. We have all the collection data over there, and I've given these pre-release forms. You guys have them. I've given you everything that the Forest Service used to use, so that when you guys do your data and somebody comes to you and says, well, is it going to match with what goes on in the Forest Service database? And say, well, we use their forms. Bing. Okay. So here we are. We were able to collect thousands of beetles. When I went out with Pete in February to Seattle, I thought for certain we were going to our doom, because I had been out there and it just, it rained. You're just sitting there and it's raining. People are jumping off the Aurora Bridge because they just can't take it anymore. And I'm like, wait, there's Laricobius in the trees. Don't jump. Okay. The other thing, field collected beetles are about twice as fertile as lab-reared beetles. Okay. Here's Pete. Nice. We're at Green Lake. For those of you guys that know Seattle, okay? One of the things I had to do there is I have to go in, and this is back before they did the big homeless purge, okay? But I would go in and I would go, where's Pat? Because there was a, in a primate environment, there's a dominant male. So in that park, there was one guy that ruled over everybody else because he was the craziest guy, but he loved these beetles. And I saw him one time, when I saw him with Rusty Ray, we were walking to a shelter house where there were hemlocks right there, and he's going crazy, and Rusty's grabbing me going, don't. I go, Pat. And he goes, Dr. McBug. And he's wearing a herringbone overalls, and he goes, and he's got this big streak of bird poop. It's like 4 inches wide, going from his shoulder to his waist. And he goes, this is spotted owl bird poop. We have a pair of nesting spotted owls in the park. And like, Pat, have I got permission to collect here? And he's like, man, go at it. So I would go out and people would come up to me and I'd go, Pat says it's okay. And they go, okay, you're all right. So this is kind of the interesting things. Now, that was a little bit of a side to what Pete is, but look, okay, this tree is about 90 feet tall. It's probably 2.5 feet, 3 feet in diameter. And look at the needle duff, you guys. Look at how smart they are. They're leaving a drip line around their trees. They don't let grass grow all the way up to these trees. Take grass away, take moss away. We hate both of them on trees. You can either have a tree or you can have grass, but you can't have both. Very healthy, okay? And the other thing that I would do is I would want to do a litmus test for people to see whether or not they were a magnet of Laricobius like Ralph is. Ralph is a Laricobius magnet. We need those kind of people. They just have a lucky gift where they can go out and find stuff. So here I am. This is the first tree that we're pounding on with Pete. And you can actually see Adelgids. You can see white Adelgids here. But I go up to Pete and I'm like, let me look at your collar. You are a Laricobius magnet, my friend. And he goes, yeah, I am. And he and I differ a little politically, but man, do we get along great. I'll put it that way. So we would use an umbrella. We can also use these beat sheets. This is right here, this is a standard meter square beat sheet that the Forest Service was used, which is both good and bad. And I'm going to tell you that in a minute, okay? So we would go out. I like an umbrella because everything that falls into an umbrella goes into the center. And the other thing you can do this push where you can sweep everything off, and what's left are the beetles. Now this is my umbrella here. So here you have a Laricobius, and we would take an aspirator and suck these beetles up. So the other thing that would happen, the park rangers would come up and go, dude, you cannot vape in here. And I'm like, man, I am not vaping. I'm sucking beetles. And they're like, what? Okay. That little wasp up in the corner by the needle up there is a parasite of silverflies, by the way, which is another good natural enemy, but it is highly parasitized by wasps. So it's good, but it works. So here we are, we're out. I wouldn't put more than 100 beetles in one of these 10-gram vials. But when you're racking up, you're going to get it, you know. So then we would dump them into a pint paper carton, or the other thing I began to get hooked on was Ben & Jerry's ice cream containers. Because it wasn't ice cream, it was a delicious Laricobius container. So that's 106 beetles, you know what I mean? It doesn't look like much, okay? So what we would do, we would ship these things back, make the release, and this was our first site. This was Hemlock Hill. This was our very first release site. It's a unique old growth stand of about 30 acres. We had 300 beetles, so we decided to put 30 beetles, about 10 beetles, 30 beetles on 10 trees, okay? 5 on the river, and we had just been through Hurricane Fran in Raleigh when we had moved up to Boone, and that had still been in my mind, and I said, you know what? We need to get away from the river and put these things up on the ridge. And I'm glad we did, because that's where we began finding beetles, because it was in the sun. These beetles love the sun. They're passive in the winter. They want to be in a sun tone with food. By the way, when you put 30 beetles on a tree that big, it dies because it's not enough beetles. The formula for this is however high the tree is, like let's say it's 50 feet high times 2. If you wanted to actually just stop the Adelgids in their tracks, like Lee Humble told me, and I didn't believe him at first, you put 100 beetles on a 50-foot tree and it's done. Boom. You'll see what I'm talking about. And in fact, I'm going to come back here in the spring and help you guys do your sampling. We're going to see what's going on. And while I'm remembering it, you guys also have you have 3 species of marsh beetle. They're predators, and they're doing something because we're finding them in the hemlocks. And what I would like to do is clip some fully enclosed Adelgids and take some of these marsh beetles and put them in a petri dish for a day or 2. And I bet you they'll rip them to pieces. And then the other thing you do is light it up with ultraviolet, because when they poop, the Adelgids have quinones in their blood, and you can detect it, okay? So, okay, October of 2004, in September, we had just been through Hurricanes Francis and Ivan, and the area along Hemlock Hill in Banner Elk got 46 inches of rain in 10 days. And I thought, we're not going to find anything. And I didn't find stuff at first. Gina Luker, and this is David Mauzell to the left, or Gina Davis. Her name was Luker back then, excuse me. I keep doing that every once in a while. They found not one but two beetles 3 weeks after the flood receded. These beetles are from the Pacific Northwest, you guys. They laugh at rain. I put them out in rain. I don't, you know what I mean? I collect them in rain. All right. So I was on Mauzell's committee for the first 22 release sites on the East Coast. So I knew where everything was. I know too much. You know what I mean? And they actually eventually hired me to do evaluations up and down the East Coast with this, okay? So we started doing sampling in 2004. We would do it twice per month, 12 trees, 48 branches per release tree. We would record all these, you know, the number of beetles found, the tree number, weather, sampling time, date, all of that. And the additional thing that we would do, here's David with a 40-foot pole pruner going up into that tree. They would clip twigs out of it. And since I'm private, one of the things that I like to do is I wanted to put myself in competition with the Forest Service. So I said, when we go to the next meeting, and what they would do is they would clip a branch that they knew was infested, and they would put it in a water pick and put it in a cage and wait for the larvae to drop out. So we came back at the very next year, and David Mauzell comes up to me and he goes, "You guys were number one. You had 314 larvae drop out of a piece of branch this big." And so every meeting, our 300 beat out of all of those releases. Because the other thing that we did, we made sure that we made releases where pines and other conifers were, because these beetles eat all adelgids. They reproduce on pine and hemlock, but they eat balsam woolly adelgid. They eat coulee spruce. We found coulee spruce gall adelgid on the spruces out there. These things are going to eat them. You're going to get conifer, you're going to get overall conifer health. Your 2 needle pines, your 5 needle pines, your larches, your hemlocks, your pines are all going to, any conifer, balsam, any of those, balsam firs, all of those are going to have improved health because of this. Now, when it's March, April, May, and you pound on a branch, look what happened. I had a larva fall right out of that ovisac that it was eating on. So you can see that here's a much larger larva. And the other thing that I will tell you is when these beetles really get going, they have more larvae than they have food. So they do just what lady beetles do. They turn around and they say, "I'm larger than you are, and you look pretty tasty." So these larvae eat their own. They will, and that's how they stay in an area. They overshoot, they eat their own. Next year they come out and they're cannibal beetles, but they're still in, you know, that's how they can remain in an area. It's really amazing to see. This is just a real quick bar chart to show you that we hit, and remember, we only have 30 eggs per ovisac. So by the time we got to the 20th of April, 2006, here, that was actually 100% predation because they had to go to 10 other ovisacs. And then we began to see overshoot because then they started to get up where they would have almost a third of the ovisacs, which meant we're going to be driven into patch dynamics. All of a sudden, there's not adelgids everywhere. And that's another good thing here that I will tell you guys is the timing here is great because you only have adelgids right now in patches. You do not have what we started with, which was every tree, like the picture that Harry showed, every needle on every tree has an adelgid. I mean, it looked like Christmas tree flocking where the trees have just been sprayed with, you know, cellulose, okay? So with 300 beetles, it took years to get them to move out like this, but then it became exponential. And this, the thing you see out there, that's Lee's McCrae Field Lab, where Ralph and I were. We got the very first release of wild collected beetles from Kimberly Wallen and Daryl Ross in December of 2005 and January of 2006, and put them out there. Okay. Now, I don't know if I can. You know what? Can I? Oh yeah, yeah. Can I just move it?
Try clicking that little arrow.
Do what?
Right there. Look there.
Oh, good. Yes. Thank you. Okay, this is a diorama of Grandfather Mountain, which was also in the very first slide that I showed you. And we put, you can see the golf course, that's Grandfather Golf and Country Club down there. It's 18 holes. You got the lower 18, I mean, you got 36 holes. You got the lower 18 and the upper 18. And so I would call Pete up, you know, we had put out 13,000 beetles in 4 years. And I'd actually gone to him and say, we're done. You don't have to hire. And he said, no, I want to keep going and I want to save all the hemlocks anywhere that I can, as long as we feel justified to spend the money. So we would go out, we would still make releases at Grandfather, but the last 2 or 3 releases, we would go to Beach Bog. We'd go to places at Sims Pond, these places that have 55-inch DBH hemlocks, and put beetles out. So we just, you know, God bless Grandfather Golf and Country Club, you guys, because they saved thousands of miles of trees. So I would call Pete up. There would be a storm. I call Pete up. How fast was the wind there? Pete say 70 miles an hour. And I'm like, well, how far do you think beetles spread? Pete say, well, how far would they go an hour? I'd say 70 miles. He said, you must have a PhD or something. So we would have a good, crazy relationship there. All right, wait a minute. There we go. All right, here's back to the first picture. It's framed with hemlocks that look way better than they did back when this was going on. Here is one of the strategies for you guys like Cobb Hill, right? You want to make a release up on these big, windy mountaintops because they're going to spread beetles like a volcano. When the beetles get going, they will spread all over the place. Okay, here's 2012. This is 2012. And you can see the release site started to get much bigger. You can see Grandfather down here in the corner. And then it just blew. Then it started blowing. We got we had a half mile by 2008, 50 plus miles by 2014. I have collected 180,000 beetles in this area. And I put a lot of them out on the 50,000 acres that Tim Sweeney's land management group, Woodland Restoration Incorporated, and I started with them in 2014. I've been working with them for 10 years now, or actually maybe probably 2015. Okay, there we go. So I went to Cooperative Extension, Jim Hamilton, who Ralph called to find out how to get in touch with me, and I went to Extension and I said, I want you guys to independently verify what I have been saying. And we did a newspaper article where these guys showed the blue dots were releases that I made and the red dots were recoveries in 2022. And one of the things that Blake Williams, who was working with Jim Hamilton, said, he said, it was really quite surprising to find this beetle all over the place. And I'm like, yeah, we put them out, man, they're there. All right. Now, here's another place. This is Plan B for you guys. This is Delaware Water Gap. All right, I'm going to tell you another quick story here. I am doing survey work for the Forest Service, and the head of the program, Brad Onken, God bless him, he's a great guy. He, Mark Mayer, Rich Evans, and there were 4 of these guys, and they went to the water gap and they told me we sampled 4 release site areas and we never found anything. And I knew that had to be wrong because I was the one that sent these guys the beetles. And I'm like, there is no way that this did not work. So I went there and I did not use this. I used a colored umbrella because you cannot see white larvae on a beat sheet like this unless you're trained to look. So I told those guys, I said, I'm throwing the gauntlet down and I'm coming back in 2 days. I don't believe you, which kind of hurt their feelings. And I said, will one of you please come back? And Mark Mayer with the New Jersey Biocontrol lab said, yeah, I'll come back. So we went on the New Jersey side down, this area here, that area is called, the lower area there is called Worthington State Forest in New Jersey. We went in there, we went up to the very first tree, and of course I pop out my orange umbrella. I think it was Dora the Explorer that I had at the time. And Mark's going, why you got that? And I said, watch this. Bang. The very first beat, I got 12 larvae. I turned to him and I said, you know, if you work for me, I'd fire you right now. But it was a joke because he helped train me way back when. So look at these. Okay, I'm going to give you guys this report because if things aren't good in my area, you can either meet me there or you guys can go to Stroudsburg all the way up. And the other thing was I was staying way out by Hickory Run State Park, 35 miles west. You notice the releases that I found, right? Way out here, this is 35 miles from those releases. Excuse me, I'll put this down. So this area is loaded, and it's got a lot of hemlock. So that's another, I want you guys to have plans A, B, C, D, E, F, G, anything that I can think of, because I've been all up and down the East Coast. I mean, this is one of the advantages of having 25 years of work in this. I discovered this predator called Scymnus coniferum. We released tons of them. We can't find it, and I think the reason is we have enough summer predators. We've got generalist predators. We've got green lacewings, harmonia, brown lacewings, Chilocarus. We've got all of these other predators, and I don't think that niche is open. I haven't been able, you know, we just haven't, the summer predators never took off like the winter predator did because we needed the winter predator, that whole niche was open. We needed that, okay? So the next thing I want to talk about is ultraviolet because I'm spending tens of thousands of hours hunched over a dissecting scope and giving most of that money to the chiropractor at the end. Oh, you know, you're like this. And I'm like, there's got to be a way to do this that is simpler than physically dissecting. Okay. At the time, I was working with the Forest Service, and my per diem budget for a hotel in Seattle was $50 a night. So guess where I'm staying? I'm staying in the working district. I've got a woman with a pit bull on the right side of me in the hotel room and a woman with a pit bull on the left side of me in this hotel room. And I decided I'd read one of my entomology journals, and in that journal, it said bedbug poop glows bright green under ultraviolet light. So I go to this crazy store that some of you may know in Seattle. It's called Archie McPhee. And it was the de rigueur supply house for anybody that was in college in the 1990s. They had Bebo the space alien and 3-foot cockroaches and just the craziest stuff. So I go in there and I buy this pen, spy pen. I buy 2 of them. I go back to my hotel room, darken it, turn on the pens. Here is bright green poop going down the wall to the baseboard, which is plastic. I pull it back, and there's a whole family of bed bugs in there. And the place I was staying at is called, I'll even mention it, it's Evergreen on 85th and Aurora in Seattle. God bless you guys. Okay. At the time, I thought I would go to these guys. I go, are you guys Russian? And they would go, huh, we're Ukrainian. Don't say Russian to me. And by the way, they were all 6'9", every one of them. So here I go. I found that bed bug. I put it in a vial, and I go down to Vladimir. I go, look, I found a bed bug in my room. He goes, how do you know it's a bed bug? I said, I have an effing PhD in entomology, Vladimir. He looks at me and he goes, oh, okay, if I give you something, we okay? And I'm like, by that time I was like, anything is, I goofed. So he turns around, he goes back in, he comes back out, he's towering over me. Here is $20 gift certificate to Starbucks. I'm like, oh, everything's cool, man. Everything is totally cool. So one night, my lovely wife, Kate, has gone to Raleigh. I know exactly which, this is the 11th of March, 2011. And so that's when I would do all my Mad Sigmund stuff that Kate would think that I was crazy doing. It was raining. I didn't feel good. I drank some Alka-Seltzer Plus, which actually was like speed. For some reason, it just wired me out. And I'm like, you know what? I've got that ultraviolet light. I ought to go out to my hemlock that I know has Laricobius on it and just shine it on it. Maybe the ovisacs will glow funny colors. Well, the first thing that I saw, it lit up like a Christmas tree. And the ovisacs, I clipped ovisacs that were orange. I clipped a twig that had 4 ovisacs that were glowing bright orange. And I took it back in and I took an insect pin and I touched the ovisac, and out of every orange ovisac popped a Laricobius larvae. And I'm like, holy cow, this is really neat. So what I found, long story short, and this had actually been written up in a paper in the 20s and 30s by German and British chemists in the lab that were looking at these things. They would grind them up and they would shine an ultraviolet light on it, and they could figure out, chrysoaphid. They gave them all these names, okay? So I had rediscovered something that had been forgotten. The other thing that happens, and so there's 4 main colors, okay? Orange is predator poop. And it can be almost any predator poop, except in the winter, who's out? Who's the only thing out? Laricobius, right? A blue, I had to learn florimetry colors, by the way. So this is blue-white. This is a normal ovisac with uric acid with just a little, with a honeydew. These are aphids and they make honeydew. They make a ball of honeydew outside of the ovisac and it glows blue-white. So you can see that. You also see up there to the left, it's yellow, and then you see the predator poop in those 2 other spots, okay? The other thing that happens is Laricobius nigrinus, I could not figure out how they would say that this thing could eat 6 to 8 adelgids a day in the wild, not lab. We're talking wild, okay? The reason is, and I learned this from Alan Cohen, who is a great artificial diet entomologist, got his degree at Riverside. These beetles are blood drinkers. They're vampires. They don't eat the adelgids. They slit the throat and drink the blood out of them. Okay? So you have vampire blood splatter here. They're eating these things and they're bleeding out. And these guys are all sloppy. They're sloppy eaters, okay? Now, so damaged eggs glow very nice white blue. And I've got a paper on this. Ralph has a copy of it. I can leave you guys a digital copy of this. And this thing that's being obscured there says, under ultraviolet light, every hotel room is a crime scene. And this is true. I had to learn that because of where I was staying. And one of the things that I would do after I learned this, when I would get a room, I would go get in that room, turn all the lights on, turn on my light, like, what are these yellow blobs on my pillowcase? We need to get rid of that right now, right? So I had really good fun one time at a wedding because I sat next to a police officer that worked with ultraviolet, and everybody's like, how come you guys are yabbering like crazy? And I'm like, yeah, I know the saliva's looking like it. Anyway, it's pretty fun. All right, so we're going to start winding down now. But we got successful control of Hemlock Woolly Adelgid with 1 predator, or we are. It's winter active. Hemlocks photosynthesize in the winter. This is why Laricobius is so important. It gives the trees its food back. Every adelgid that it kills turns that needle back on, and the photosynthates go back into the tree. We already know what the threshold is. If you have less than 30% needles infested on a tree, they grow like normal. Predators will drop it below that. On the average, I have seen these beetles consume 97% of dense adelgid populations. Predation like that causes patch dynamics where I have to go out every year. Every year is different. It's like a new painting every year, okay? We have massive hemlock regrowth over the entire high country. The very first thing that started happening after we had dieback and we put these predators out, we had this thing we call feather dusters. All the trees just started making these crazy, they were just going at it. They were making needles and everything, and it was so cool. And the leaders on these things would be, they'd be almost a foot long. And we have something in Christmas trees we call triple flush, which means they grow out, they grow laterals, and they grow out a little further, and that's called triple flush. So we would see that, okay? And this is because we were doing operational levels of beetles. You're not going to put 200 beetles out and expect to save trees. I mean, you would 5 to 8 years down the road, but if you want to save them now and you have some guy like Lee Humble comes up to me and says, you can use this beetle like a biopesticide. Well, he was impeccable, by the way. Lee Humble was an impeccable entomologist, like Dr. Cock is also, Scott Salem. All these guys are just excellent entomologists. Okay, so here we see, if you guys haven't seen this before, there's an electron micrograph of an adelgid at the base of the needle. Those little dots that you see are cast skins, so you can tell what stage the adelgid is in by how many of those skins are sitting on the ovosect. They have 4 instars, so if you see 3 cast skins, you got a mature adelgid. Okay. So, proper identification of the pest is number 1. Although Hemlock Woolly Adelgid is native to Asia, it's also native to the Pacific Northwest. Laricobius nigrinus controls the adelgid there. And I was in ag and organic agriculture and used to grow broccoli commercially, and we would farmscape all of our fields just like we farmscape the Christmas trees. And so the reason that technique worked in the forest was, if everything else was equal, we had 2 sites. We had a site that had pines or other conifers. We're going to put them in that, because then you have 4 or 5 additions to the salad bar of eating. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that our beetles did so great. We have the same trees you guys have. We have firs. We have red spruce, it's native. We have 2 needle pine. We have 5 needle pine. We have Carolina hemlock. We have eastern hemlock. We have larches. All of these get adelgids. So when you drop these beetles in an area with all that food, man, they don't, you've lessened environmental resistance on them. They're able to, they're able to really go for it. And so the other thing that we need to do is we're going to have to do forest scaping where we are, because our riparian areas are destroyed. It's actually, and we want that native biodiversity. We want to put native plants back in there. Kudzu, mile-a-minute weed, Japanese joint grass, all of this other stuff comes in. And so this is what we began to see. These trees here would be only what I would call first flush. You know what I mean? They're only this big, and that's what you normally get in the forest, unless you're along an edge. But I could look around here, and you guys have such healthy hemlocks, and they have beautiful long leaders like this. And we're right at the time where I want to be able to come here 25 years later when I'm 93 with you guys and go, remember when we did all this stuff and it worked? Right? All right. So I'm gonna end it up here. We have this native predator, Laricobius nigrinus, established over 100 miles in every direction from us, from this release and the continuous releases that we made with grandfather and also with aphis with Ron Week. When my beetles come out, as I'm going to find them, I'm going to give them a beer, because they're old enough to drink now. We haven't had any luck with any of the summer predators, and I'm going to tell you guys, if you have a chance, focus on Laricobius, because it's the foundation. I'm not anti any of this other stuff, but this is what saves trees. When you have that winter generation of adelgid that lasts for 8 months, and that's the one that blocks all the photosynthate, we would always see our hemlocks die in the spring, because this thing had just sucked the life out of those trees. And there you've got ultraviolet light. Okay, you can't see this down here.
Hit that little arrow again and go click to the top.
Oh, good, yeah, good idea. Duh. I'm learning a lot here. All right, come here, you. This is where we put 300 adults, and I just wanted to put a time scale of years. The very first year after we put 300 adults out, we got 1/100. We found 3. Gina and Stuart found 2, and I found 1 up top. And then we got 12, and then we got 30, and then it just kind of hummed along for a little while in the low, like low hundreds, and then look here, 20,000. They breed like insects.
Which is the same as on the Christmas tree.
Yes. Yep, exactly. Let me see if I can get this thing. This is just showing the beginning of regrowth in the 5 release trees that were along the Elk River that I don't even know if they're still there now, to tell you the truth. But I just wanted, you know, I mean, we started getting excited because we could see these trees were coming back. They were not graying out and dying. And here's another interesting thing. If hemlocks know that this adelgid is on them, they can actually shift their growing period. So what would happen where we were is you would have a leader that had the first maybe 2 to 3 inches of it would have adelgids, but the trees would wait and they'd start growing in July and August when the crawlers were done. Because the tree's like, all I got to do is I'm holding my breath. Can you hold your breath as long as me? Nope. I'm going to grow. So that was another neat thing. All right. Here I am up on the top of Grandfather Mountain, up on the Mile High Bridge up there. This is facing north. And I just, okay, that's Sugar, no, here's Sugar Mountain. This is Roan Mountain. That's one of the 7 devils there. This is the 105 Valley. Look at this. You'll see this better. Okay, now I turn and I go south. Look at the hemlocks. It's just, I mean, I still get goosebumps. I still get the glory bumps when I see them. Look. Okay, off in the distance, right above my finger, that's Hawksville. This very back line, way back there, is the Black Mountains, and there are beetles. There are beetles all the way through this whole thing. And it's just great to look out with these, a place to live. Wood thrushes, 90% of wood thrush nests are in hemlocks alone. The little tree that I discovered the glowing poop on down by my house had, back in the day, 15 years ago, had a wood thrush nest in the top of it because it couldn't find any other trees to nest in. So, I mean, that's how much it came, you know, it blanked down. So this is it. We already know some of this. I've repeated this. I like to say, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then tell you what I told you, like my father would say in the military. So we have about 20,000 square miles or more of hemlock regrowth. We can't find that beetle, even though we put 14,000 of them out. And then we want, you know, we want this baseline data. And then the airplane plant analogy is what I want to do with you guys, is we're a mother plant. We're going to send a chute out to you guys, and you're going to start this airplane plant and make this thing work. So I will stop here by saying thank you to APHIS, to Forest Service, to Grandfather Golf and Country Club, to the North Carolina Forest Service, and especially to you guys, because we have been so warmly received here by you guys. It just feels like I'm back in family. And we're here to do a wonderful job for you guys and have some fun while we're doing it, because I started in 1999 and I still party like it's 1999. Thank you. Oh, well, one other, here's a Grandfather Golf and Country Club changed their logo to a hammock. All right. I want to get you guys all memorabilia, but the pro shop got washed away. And they have to put in a reorder.
Okay, I see Ryan Crandall, who's State Forest Health Specialist, has a question.
Yay, Ryan!
Or would like to make a comment. Hi, Ryan.
Hey everybody, can you guys hear me inside the room there?
Modestly. Let's see.
We'll crank it up.
Yeah, this computer doesn't crank very loud. Okay, go ahead. We'll repeat what you asked her today.
So I wanted to just say that, you know, with the Delaware Water Gap was brought up as a location that has established Laricobius, and you mentioned going down and making collections. And I want folks to know that they shouldn't go off on their own making collections of beetles down there and then trying to bring them back here, because you really do need to be trained and know what you're looking for.
Exactly.
The worst thing that can happen is you go down there, make collections of a beetle, and then bring something random back to New Hampshire. We don't want that at all. So that's really something that trained professionals should be going down and making those collections and correct identifications of the beetles that are going to be brought back to New Hampshire.
You need to have him and me come down.
That's right.
Ryan and I both.
That's right. Ryan was out in the woods with us yesterday by North Pond in Harrisville, looking for the Hemlock Woolly Adelgids because they're just starting to appear.
And he knew where they were.
He knew where they were. He found them, and
Yeah.
he trained us. These guys trained a team. There were 8 of us who went out to learn how to spot where the Adelgids are. Because when you ship up the Laricobius nigrinus, those are the trees where we want to put out the beetles.
Yep.
So I thank both for that. Ryan's been a huge help. He's
Amen.
offered to pop up and help us spread the beetles when they get here. And that's a godsend. Thank you. Other questions or comments here? If not, I thank you all for your attention tonight. This is, it's been an exciting project for us for the past year to hook up and be able to contribute something. I've heard some skepticism from some of the officials in state that say it may not get an effective population, but they've been importing beetles from the USDA for some years now, hoping at least to get populations established across New England. And if at the least we make a good contribution to that, it's great. If we happen to hit the golden nugget and get breeding populations in Harrisville, they'll spread out to Dublin and Hancock and Peterborough and Keene. And that'll be magical. And maybe in 4 or 5 years, we'll be a collection site to help spread them
And
around
Ryan
the state.
found nigrinus in the White Mountains.
Yes.
35 miles from the release. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a collection of Laricobius nigrinus near Ossipee. And so that's about 35 miles north of the nearest release site, which was either in Maine or southern New Hampshire. And so just for context, within New Hampshire, we've released since about 2008, about 16,000 Laricobius nigrinus. The trouble getting them established here has really been our colder climates, and then the Adelgid populations themselves, which ebb and flow year to year. Our colder winters end up, we have less consistently high populations of the Adelgid, and so therefore, if you're releasing a predator onto those Adelgid and they're low density, it can be hard to recover the predator, and so it just takes a lot of folks out looking. And so yeah, I plan on helping with post-release recovery of adult beetles as well as larval Laricobius beetles.
Fantastic. Katie?
Are the beetles adversely affected by the polar vortex?
No.
The same way?
No. We put him on a freezing plate. We took him down to 17. This is on a metal freezing plate. We took him down to 17 degrees Celsius before they froze.
What's up, chat there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's Ryan's. Yep. Some of that was earlier on here.
There was one question about releasing them in the southeast, I think.
For those of us in southeast New Hampshire with HWA for 20
So,
years,
I'll
any
take that.
possibility of doing it in
I'll
this
take that
area?
question for you, Harry.
Yeah.
So in
Please.
southern New Hampshire, southeastern New Hampshire, that's the only location in New Hampshire that we've got a known established population of Laricobius nigrinus so far. And we're hopeful that in the next couple of years, we're going to be able to make some collections in that area where we know that they're established to redistribute them. And so we will be expanding, locations where we release Laricobius in that area.
Awesome.
Ralph, can you expand on your umbrella story you told me at lunch today when I called? Umbrella story? On beetles. And your umbrella?
Well, like Dick said, is that with the umbrellas, you want a colored background. Is that what you're talking about? So you can see the water.
Yeah, more on the trees where you did it, in Eastview and down the road here.
You mean where the sampling I've done?
Yeah.
Well, I found a Laricobius beetle I actually found two. We found one yesterday. But he dropped it.
I'm fired. I fired myself, but then I hired myself.
Super. Well, I thank you all tonight. This has been awesome. Thank you very much, Dick. His email is Dr. McBug. I thank the Harris Center for hosting us tonight. I certainly thank New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions for sharing and getting us online with this seminar. Doug.
Are you looking for, I read that you guys are looking for landowners that have hemlocks that you
We are.
Release them and all?
We identified a dozen sites around New Hampshire that have prospects for having heavy hemlock groves. And we've been going out to them to take a look at whether or not we find the adelgids there. In two of them, we have found adelgids. In two, we haven't. So if we're going to reach our dozen sites, we are going to continue looking for additional sites. Just in Harrisville. I will say also this afternoon when we were looking at a site that's been, where Ralph has been collecting in the past, it was not a heavy hemlock site. It was perhaps a third hemlock, the adelgids in there. And so we may we looked at 10 feet high with low branches down to the ground, preferably where there's a sun tunnel so that the beetles, as we mentioned, they're little black solar collectors, can stay a little bit warmer in bad weather. Now, we're also looking at high sites where they can be blown around, medium level and low level sites where they'll be more protected if we get a vortex. It turns out that the woolly adelgids die back in a vortex. And so when they run out of food, so do the beetles. But as the adelgids recover, the beetles do too.
And they'll move to pines and eat
And
pines.
that's right.
Yes, we
They
did.
do
Right.
love white pine.
Yep.
They look there as well.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's where Ryan, they found Laricobius and white mountains on white.
Yeah. Don Scott's been helping lead our field efforts here. He's part of the Harrisville Trails group that go out and keep the trails open and hikeable around town. And so we had about 6 volunteers from that group, plus our Conservation Commission members out there. So it's pretty exciting. And if it works and we can do something, won't that be wonderful?
Harry, I just
So
wanted to add-
if you get desperate for samples, I have all of what you're talking about.
I'd like to look at that. I'd like to see that, Doug.
Conservation easement of the Conservancy.
Fantastic. You were saying, Ryan?
I had one thing to add, and maybe a question for Dick or his perspective. But in the Northeast, because we've had issues establishing, I'm thinking back to Dave Mozell's, I think it's a 2010 paper. He had suggested that in the Northeast we should do larger release sizes, about at least 600. And so if you can't find those 12 sites, maybe you could do 6 and just instead of doing 300 beetles, do 600.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for that. You're right. That sounds great.
Yeah,
to me.
and what we were able to do, I think, with the Seattle beetles is we were able to numerically make up for genetics because we can find beetles at the hemlock spruce fir line on grandfather. You know what I mean? So they have adapted to that cold there. But the same process, what you're saying has got to happen here is it's going to go through a filtering process where you're going to have those
beetles that are more cold tolerant and able to adapt to this climate, it might take longer and more beetles. You're right.
Now, I have to say, as unlikely as it may seem, there aren't that many entomologists around. Ryan Crandall is one of the few who he got his master's thesis studying this particular Laricobius nigrinus beetle a few years back. And our incredible fortune to have run into both of you is great.
Have him here.
Exactly.
And he's right here, living in Keene, working in Hillsborough. So we look forward to seeing a lot more of you, Ryan. I thank you all for joining us tonight. This has been great. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Barbara Richter. Thank you, Eric Masterson. Thank you all.